Victoria Sterling had not wanted to go on a blind date. Her assistant, Rebecca, had been so persistent that Victoria finally agreed just to end the endless discussions. Rebecca meant well, always hovering like a protective younger sister, but sometimes her good intentions pushed too far. This blind date was one of those times. At 31, Victoria Sterling commanded the empire she had built with her own brilliance. Sterling Technologies, a company recognized internationally for its cutting-edge software solutions. Her board members often marveled at her ability to anticipate market trends before they emerged, to design strategies that put competitors years behind, and to lead her team with precision that demanded both excellence and loyalty. But behind the walls of her office, where numbers, contracts, and innovations filled her days, there was a silence that lingered long after her employees left. That silence belonged to her personal life. 2 years earlier, a car accident had changed everything. The crash had left her with a spinal cord injury and confined her to a wheelchair. The months that followed were grueling. Surgeries, physical therapy, and the endless recalibration of her once active lifestyle. She had survived, adapted, and rebuilt, but some scars were deeper than physical. The accident hadn't weakened her sharp mind or her determination, but it had changed her perception of people and how they saw her. Too often she had watched a shift in someone's expression when their eyes dropped from her face to her wheelchair. Pity, awkwardness, sometimes even shame. The chair became the first thing people noticed, the lens through which they judged her worth. So she had withdrawn. Business remained her fortress. Social outings grew rare. Friendships faded under the weight of her excuses, and dating became almost unthinkable. It wasn't that she had stopped believing in love. It was that she no longer believed love could find her, not in this new reality. Rebecca, however, refused to give up. "Victoria," she had said firmly one morning, planning the dinner reservation on her desk, "you need this. You need to feel human outside of boardrooms and business calls. Just give it one evening. If it's awful, you never have to let me talk about dating again." Reluctantly, Victoria agreed. The reservation was at Meridian, an upscale downtown restaurant known for its glass chandeliers, attentive staff, and 5-star menu. Before confirming, Victoria had personally called to ensure the restaurant could accommodate her wheelchair, a ritual she performed for every public outing. The manager had reassured her, promising ramps, accessible restrooms, and staff trained to assist discreetly if needed. On the evening of the date, she arrived precisely on time. Punctuality was second nature to her, as was poise. She wore a tailored navy dress. Her blonde hair swept into a sleek bun, makeup polished but understated. Everything about her presence said confidence, though beneath it she carried the familiar weight of apprehension. The maitre d' led her to the reserved table. Victoria positioned herself, placed her phone discreetly on the table, and surveyed the elegant dining room. Couples leaned close over flickering candles. Waiters moved like shadows carrying silver trays, and soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. She waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. She scrolled through her emails, answered a text from Rebecca. "Good luck tonight. He's perfect for you, I swear." And ordered a glass of water. At the 20-minute mark, her phone buzzed. James Morrison, the lawyer her assistant had praised, had sent a message. "Sorry, something came up. Rain check." Victoria stared at the words. Her hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. The message was short, almost careless. A familiar mixture of humiliation and resignation washed over her. She had suspected this might happen. The moment James saw her in the wheelchair, or even learned about it beforehand, he might rethink everything. She had hoped, just this once, to be wrong. But the reality was sharper. She had been stood up. "W." They found a booth near the window, and David quickly shifted a chair aside, so her wheelchair fit comfortably. It was such a small gesture, but he did it with effortless ease, not calling attention to it, not treating it as an inconvenience. Just natural. Victoria felt herself relax in a way she hadn't expected. They ordered a large pepperoni pizza and sodas, and soon the conversation flowed. David told her about his auto repair shop, his eyes lighting up as he described restoring a 1967 Mustang, where the way an engine sounded when it purred back to life after weeks of work. He spoke with passion, not about profit margins or expansion strategies, but about craft, satisfaction, and loyalty to his customers. Victoria listened, intrigued by his grounded enthusiasm. She was used to hearing men speak in numbers and power plays, used to analyzing their words for hidden motives. With David, there were no games, just honesty. When he asked about her company, he didn't do so with the eager greed of someone hoping for a connection to wealth. He asked because he was genuinely curious about what drove her, about the ideas behind her innovations. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not for her wheelchair, not for her status, but for the woman she truly was. Do you ever get tired of people looking at the chair before they look at you? David asked gently, not with pity but with a kind of respectful candor. Victoria blinked. The question was so direct, so unfiltered, that it startled her, and yet it was exactly what she had longed for. Every day, she admitted. But tonight, I don't feel it. David smiled softly. Good. Because to me, it's just part of the picture, not the headline. Her chest tightened with unexpected warmth. The evening stretched far beyond pizza. They talked about films, discovering they both adored Casablanca. They laughed over childhood mishaps, shared travel dreams, and even argued playfully over whether New York or Paris had better coffee. Hours slipped by unnoticed. When David finally walked her back to her car, Victoria found herself reluctant to leave. I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, David said as she transferred from her wheelchair to her driver's seat with practiced ease. But would you like to have dinner again tomorrow night? Somewhere I can actually afford to pay the bill. Victoria paused, studying him. She had spent months convincing herself that dating was impossible, that no man could see past her chair, that vulnerability was a risk she couldn't afford. Yet here he was, a mechanic with kind eyes, asking not because of obligation or pity, but because he truly wanted to see her again. You know what? She said with a smile. Why don't you cook for me? I'll bring dessert and wine. His answering grin transformed his whole face. Deal. Though fair warning, I make a mean spaghetti, but that's about it. Victoria laughed, the sound bubbling out of her freely. Spaghetti it is. The months that followed. What began as one evening of pizza turned into another, then another. David proved to be thoughtful, intelligent, and refreshingly unpretentious. He never tried to impress her with titles or wealth. Instead, he impressed her with kindness, loyalty, and the simple but profound way he treated her as an equal partner. He adapted naturally to accessibility considerations, choosing restaurant with ramps, rearranging his apartment without making it obvious, even modifying his car shop so one of his regular customers who used a wheelchair could navigate freely. He didn't announce these things as favors or sacrifices. He simply did them, as if they were obvious and normal. For Victoria, this was revolutionary. She had grown used to people either ignoring her needs or overemphasizing them until she felt like a burden. David walked the balance perfectly. With him, she was neither fragile nor extraordinary. She was just Victoria. She found herself opening up in ways she hadn't for years. They discussed fears, dreams, frustrations. He admitted his struggles as a small business owner, the late nights worrying about bills, the exhaustion of manual work. She shared the pressures of leading a company where every decision carried millions of dollars worth of consequences. Their worlds were different, blue-collar and corporate, wrenches and boardrooms, but those differences became strengths. David grounded her, reminding her the value of simplicity. She expanded his horizons, showing him possibilities beyond what he had imagined. And slowly, naturally, love bloomed. With quiet composure, Victoria lifted her chin and motioned to the waiter. He approached with concern in his eyes. "Ma'am," he asked softly, "will your companion be joining you this evening?" Victoria offered him her professional smile, the one she wore in boardrooms when concealing irritation. "Change of plans," she said. "Could I please have a check for my water?" The waiter nodded sympathetically and turned away. Before he returned, a voice broke the quiet around her table. "Excuse me," it said with polite hesitation. "I couldn't help overhearing. Are you Victoria Sterling?" Victoria looked up. Standing there was a man in his early 30s, dark-haired, with kind eyes that reflected concern rather than intrusion. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, not the attire for fine dining, but something about his casualness made him seem refreshingly real in the midst of Meridian's refinement. "I am," Victoria replied cautiously. The man smiled, though there was nervousness behind it. "I'm David Chen, and I think we may have stumbled into a mix-up. When I heard your name, I realized you might be the woman my sister Emma was trying to set me up with. She gave me a description and mentioned you'd be here tonight." Confusion replaced embarrassment in Victoria's mind. "Your sister?" David nodded quickly, expression apologetic. "Emma Chan. She works in your marketing department. She's been insisting for weeks that I meet her brilliant boss, but I kept saying no because—" He hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Because I figured someone like you wouldn't be interested in dating a mechanic." The pieces clicked into place. Rebecca had arranged one blind date. Emma had arranged another. By coincidence, both had led to the same restaurant, the same evening. James Morrison had canceled, but David Chen had arrived. "So," Victoria said carefully, "you are not James Morrison, and you weren't expecting a mechanic." David replied with a self-deprecating smile. "I completely understand if this isn't what you had in mind for your evening." Victoria studied him. Unlike so many faces she had seen in the last 2 years, his expression carried no pity, no discomfort, no forced attempt to mask unease about her wheelchair. Instead, she saw warmth, sincerity, and perhaps a little hopefulness. For the first time that evening, Victoria's lips curved into a genuine smile. "Actually," she said, surprising even herself, "this is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. Would you like to join me for dinner?" David's relief was obvious as his smile widened. "I'd be honored, though I should warn you, I know nothing about fancy restaurants. I was planning to suggest a pizza place down the street." Victoria laughed, the sound startling her with its spontaneity. "That sounds perfect. Let me just cancel this reservation." And just like that, what had begun as a humiliating evening transformed into something entirely unexpected. The maitre d' looked disappointed when Victoria politely canceled her table, but she didn't care. For once, she wasn't concerned about appearances, reputations, or expectations. David helped her navigate the street, his steps naturally adjusting to her pace without making it feel like a chore. He held the door to the small pizza place just down the block, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the evening air. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to Meridian's polished elegance. The scent of baked dough and oregano filled the air. Families laughed at corner booths. Teenagers hovered over slices bigger than their faces. And a casual chatter gave the place a warmth that Meridian's chandeliers never could. Months later, they sat together on Victoria's accessible rooftop garden, the city lights glittering below. She leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how comfortable physical affection had become again. With David, she wasn't fragile, wasn't breakable. She was desirable, loved, whole. When she finally told him about the failed blind date, the one that had led to their meeting, he laughed with genuine amusement. "So James Morrison's rudeness was actually the best thing that could have happened," David said, brushing his thumb over her hand. Victoria smiled softly. "That man's loss was definitely our gain." A new chapter. 18 months later, they married. The ceremony was not extravagant, but it was unforgettable. Family, friends, and colleagues gathered in a venue designed with accessibility in every detail. Ramps adorned with flowers, wide spaces filled with light. Emma gave a triumphant speech about her successful matchmaking, while Rebecca sheepishly admitted that her setup had been a disaster that turned into something miraculous. Victoria's success in business allowed David to expand his auto shop into a training center, teaching other mechanics how to create accessibility modifications for vehicles. Together, they built not just a marriage, but a shared mission, blending her strategic vision with his practical craftsmanship. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was deeply, beautifully theirs. Years later, when Victoria spoke at conferences about disability and leadership, she often included a personal truth. Some of life's most beautiful connections happen when our original plans fall apart. Sometimes the most healing relationships begin not with perfect matches or ideal circumstances, but with the courage to remain open to unexpected kindness from people who see our worth exactly as we are. And every time she said those words, David, her mechanic who had wandered into her life on the night she was stood up, was in the audience, smiling at her like she was the best decision he had ever made.